Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Political Dispatch, the podcast that explores big issues and ideas in a conversational way. My name is Tom Spare, and I'll be hosting this episode solo today. Lily and Sid will be back with me very soon. Today, I'm focusing on Donald Trump's inaugural address as the 47th President of the United States. This historic moment marked him as only the second person in US history to serve two non-consecutive terms as president, and the other being Grover Cleveland. Cleveland's terms were from 1885 to 1889 and then 1893 to 1897. President Trump now holds a couple of other distinctions, if you can call them that. First, at 78 years and 220 days old, he's the oldest person to assume the office of president, taking the title from his predecessor, Joe Biden. He's also the first convicted felon to hold the presidency, adding an unprecedented dynamic to this second term. Due to Arctic conditions, the inauguration moved indoors to the Capitol building rotunda. This marks the first indoor presidential inauguration since Ronald Reagan's second term in 1985. Because of the change of venue, there was a smaller guest list, which included outgoing President Joe Biden, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden, former Presidents Obama, Bush, and Clinton, Hillary Clinton, as well as Vice President Kamala Harris, former Vice Presidents Mike Pence and Dan Quayle, high-profile tech leaders like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai, and TikTok CEO Shou Zi Chew. The event carried the pomp and ceremony of previous inaugurations, but felt more intimate. The interior grandeur and smaller crowd allowed cameras to easily capture reactions, giving the occasion a unique atmosphere. The inaugural address is an essential tradition for US presidents. Its purpose is to set the vision for the presidency, serving as a launch pad for the administration's agenda and tone. Historically, most presidents have delivered inaugural addresses, with the exception being John Tyler, Millard Fillmore, Andrew Johnson, Chester A. Arthur, and Gerald Ford, who assumed office mid-term. A bit of trivia: the longest inaugural address was delivered by William Henry Harrison in 1841, 8,445 words. It took 2 hours to deliver. Tragically for Harrison, he fell ill shortly after and died a month later, making his presidency the shortest in US history. By contrast, Trump's 2025 inaugural address was 2,885 words and lasted for around 30 minutes. His 2017 address was even briefer, nearly half the length, with 1,433 words at just over 16 minutes long. After Vice President J.D. Vance, now the third youngest in US history, age 40, was sworn in, Trump took the oath of office. The speech that then followed struck a more optimistic tone compared to 2017. In 2017, he described mothers and children trapped in poverty in our inner cities, rusted out factories scattered like tombstones across the landscape of our nation. This time, his opening line declared, "The golden age of America begins right now." But he did criticize Democrats. It was a very partisan speech, and he made no bones about lots of accusations which are very contested. So let's break down the major policy points from Trump's second inaugural address. Trump declared a national emergency at the US-Mexico border, promising to deploy the military. He invoked the 1798 Alien and Sedition Acts to justify arresting and expelling gang members involved in trafficking and illegal border crossings. The administration's economic priorities focus on tackling inflation by reducing overspending and addressing energy prices, although the details of this weren't hugely clear. From the tackling inflation, there's lots of things related to energy sufficiency and energy itself. Trump announced a national energy emergency with plans to ramp up domestic oil and gas production, summed up with the mantra, "We will drill, baby, drill." He also vowed to roll back the Green New Deal and revoke the electric vehicle mandate introduced by President Biden, which was a really key part of the Biden presidency. Trump promised to overhaul trade policies to prioritize American workers and families. Tariff and taxes will target foreign competitors with an external revenue service established to manage revenues from duties and tariffs. The president also announced the creation of a Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, to streamline operations and reduce bureaucracy. This will be led by Elon Musk. His administration also aims to end government censorship, restore freedom of speech protections, and reject efforts to socially engineer race and gender dynamics. Official policy now only recognizes two genders, male and female. The expelled service members who refuse the COVID-19 vaccine mandates will be reinstated with full back pay. Trump promised to refocus the military on defending enemies rather than, in his words, engaging in social experiments. His goals include rebuilding the military to be the world's strongest, although if you look at any measure, the US military is way ahead in terms of money spent, capability, and its ability to deploy all over the world. He highlighted bringing back hostages from the Middle East as a success before even taking office. He proposed renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America and reverting Mount Denali's name to Mount McKinley. He also suggested the US take back the Panama Canal. At this point, he said, above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China. We gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. Again, an unexpected note in his speech will make a lot of people very nervous about his intent. There was also a line about expanding the US borders, which is difficult to understand where the US would be expanding its territory. And this is a very sort of imperialist sort of position to take, very military-like. Trump's speech outlined a vision for a merit-based, colorblind society focused on law and order. His administration seeks to restore faith, wealth, democracy, and freedom as guiding principles to the nation. He also announced a mission to Mars, which is a nod to Elon Musk, whose SpaceX program and others has really been taking off recently, if you want to excuse the pun there. Trump's speech was notably measured and functional, setting a clear agenda, repealing many of Joe Biden's policies. While lacking in elevated language, it served as a to-do list for the administration's immediate priorities. Trump signed a record number of executive orders on his first day of office, demonstrating both an expediency to initiate election promises, but also testing the boundaries of presidential power. Some of these executive orders were signed in an arena with thousands of supporters cheering the president on as he signed the orders. In this flurry of activity, accuracy and detail got caught up in the mix, with the media struggling to sort of keep up in what was going on. Initial reports suggested that Trump had reversed the executive order to lower prescription drugs costs. However, PolitiFact confirmed this was not necessarily the case. So Trump reversed Biden's executive order directing the Health and Human Services Department to develop a pilot program aimed at reducing Medicare and Medicaid prescription drugs costs. While the order was revoked, the pilot plans had not been implemented, so no immediate changes had occurred. Importantly, Trump's action did not affect the cost-saving measures in the Inflation Reduction Act, which capped insulin prices and allowed Medicare to negotiate drugs prices. These changes, being codified into law by Congress, can only be undone by new legislation. According to experts, such revocations mainly signal political disagreement rather than altering established laws. Notable executive orders included pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, which he's done previously, ending birthright citizenship. This order has been challenged and will likely be incredibly difficult to pass. And it's basically ending law which says that if you're born in the US, no matter your parents' origin, you automatically become a US citizen. Withdrawing from the World Health Organization will take a year to come into effect. This is something that Trump has done previously. He signed a executive order to rename the Gulf of Mexico. He's recognizing only two sexes, male and female, which again will be heavily scrutinized and might fall apart in the courts. And so that's a sort of an idea of what he wants to do. On the 23rd of January, President Trump announced the declassification of records concerning the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert Kennedy, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. After signing this executive order, Trump turned to his aide and he said, "Give that to RFK Jr., holding the pen he had just signed the order with. This was a reference to the health secretary and son of Robert F. Kennedy, nephew of JFK. In the House of Representatives, resolution number 7 was committed to access to women's healthcare, submitted by Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona and Congressman Clay Higgins of Louisiana, both Republicans. Although on first reading it seems to support women's rights, there's one line that needs additional scrutiny, where healthcare for women should also address the needs of men, families, and communities as they relate to women's healthcare. Suggesting that women's rights and a woman's rights to do whatever they like with their bodies is not just down to them. Although not a bill, a resolution signals the intent of Congress to legislate on this particular topic. It's likely that women's rights will feature again during this Congress. This resolution and Trump's extensive agenda points towards a handmaid's tale becoming more and more prescient by the day. Yesterday, I was talking to a friend of mine who mentioned the 14 characteristics of fascism. It wasn't something I'd heard of. So it's based on two pieces of academic work, a 1995 essay entitled Eternal Fascism by Umberto Eco, and an article published in 2003 called Fascism Anyone by Lawrence Britt. Britt offers a clear list of 14 characteristics of fascism. And I thought I'd talk about this because it's probably worth you deciding whether America hits the mark with these 14 characteristics. First of all, there's powerful and continuing nationalism. So there's lots of patriotic slogans, symbols, and themes that dominate, fostering a sense of unity and national pride. There's a disdain for human rights, with civil liberties curtailed. There's an identification of enemies, scapegoats. So the regime targets specific groups like minorities, immigrants, political opponents as threats to unity and security. Excessive funding and glorification of the military, often linked to national strength. There's rampant sexism. There's a controlled mass media where the state or allies control the media to limit dissent and disseminate propaganda. There's an obsession with national security. Fear is used to justify draconian policies and the erosion of freedoms. Religion and government is intertwined. Corporate power is protected. Labor power is suppressed. Trade unions and workers' rights are dismantled to eliminate opposition and control labor forces. There's a disdain for intellectuals and the arts, including academics and artists are silenced or censored for criticizing the regime. There's an obsession with crime and punishment. Law enforcement is militarized with harsh penalties and emphasis on strict control. There's rampant cronyism and corruption. The regime fosters relationships between government and corporate elites, prioritizing loyalty over merit. And finally, there's fraudulent elections. Elections are manipulated through voter suppression, fraud, or intimidation to maintain the regime's power. My friend and I concluded that the US was scoring 13, roughly, or nearly 13 out of the 14 right now. But it's worth noting that at the time of recording, we're only sort of not even a week into the new administration. But also the indicators are there. The US, one of the bastions of liberal democracy, is backsliding into a fascistic regime. President Trump's second inaugural address marked a historic and polarizing moment in American politics. His ambitious policy proposals and rapid executive actions signal an administration eager to leave its mark. But these plans also raise questions about implementation, executive overreach, as well as raising concerns about the rights of minorities, political and economic freedoms too. In conclusion, I didn't want to entirely end on a depressing note, but a reminder that far greater things are at play. In times of great challenge and disenchantment, I often think of Carl Sagan's pale blue dot. It gives a perspective to me, and I hope it'll offer some solace to you too. Carl Sagan was writing about a probe that had gone into far into space and had taken a picture of Earth, and it just appeared as a tiny pale blue dot.
Consider again that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit? Yes. Settle? Not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
Thank you for listening to the Political Dispatch. If you have any thoughts or questions about today's episode, reach out on social media or share your comments. Make sure you subscribe as well. Until next time, take care.